English language learners. Also welcome Destiny Shannon, ML Program Specialist, Carolina TESOL Advocacy Coordinator for South Carolina, SCMLE Network Leadership Committee member, and South Carolina Seal of Biliteracy Committee member. And finally, Jen Saunders, middle school literacy interventionist and coach, SCMLE Director of Professional Support, and National Board Certified Teacher of English as a New Language. Thank you all for agreeing to be panelists today. We appreciate your willingness to answer questions and share your expertise. Before we begin with our panelists, we thought we would lay a foundation in what we mean by rural multilingual learners in South Carolina. What's a rural teacher? A teacher who generally has a caseload spread throughout a district that is geographically large due to agriculture and minimal industry. Data from the Why Rural Matters 2025 report shows in rural districts in South Carolina, per pupil instruction spending is $1,200 below the rural U.S. average, and adjusted teacher salaries are almost $11,000 below the U.S. rural average. Classroom and content teachers are less likely to have been trained to support multilingual students, and there are fewer trained multilingual program specialists in these areas. What is a rural student? A multilingual learner who lives and attends school in an area with a low overall population spread throughout a large geographic area. The area has minimal commercial businesses and generally a lot of agricultural business and landscape. The Why Rural Matters report also states 1 in 5 students in South Carolina is rural, and 2 in 5 schools are rural. South Carolina's rural districts are some of the most diverse in the United States, with a 48.2% chance that 2 randomly selected students in rural schools would identify as different races or ethnicities. According to the Regional Education Laboratory Central, rural areas are experiencing a rapid growth in racial, ethnic, and linguistic diversity. Recent immigrants in these areas are most likely to have beginning English proficiency, and rural ML students are often from families of workers in meatpacking, dairy industries, ranching, and farming, earning lower wages than their urban counterparts. Here we have a map of rural areas in South Carolina. When we look at this map, the counties are differentiated in rural and urban. It looks as though there is almost as much urban area as rural areas in the state. However, we can more specifically define rural MLs with 3 rural designations. Fringe, areas which are 5 miles or less to an urban area. Distant rurals, which are 5 to 25 miles to an urban area. And remote, which is more than 25 miles to an urban area. This means that many of our districts are considered urban, but have individual schools which are rural or populations of students in those schools who are rural. These teachers and students face difficulties of rural populations within a school or a district that does not have these same difficulties. Our presenters have experience in each of these contexts. Jen is in a fringe area near Bluffton. Destiny is in a distant rural setting in the upstate, and Christy is in a remote rural area in the Midlands. Finally, before we get started, let's take care of some housekeeping. We ask that you keep your microphones off, but we absolutely encourage you to add your questions to the chat box. We have someone who is monitoring the chat box, and we will respond to those questions at the end of our presentation. If you would like to receive a professional development certificate for tonight's virtual training, please email info@scmle.org to request a certificate. We'll also drop that in the chat box. Please stay until the end of tonight's virtual training because we will be giving away Saddleback Education's Welcome Newcomers Library, which is an amazing resource for any school. And it's an expensive resource that a rural school would be super happy to have. Finally, we do have a feedback form. We will give a QR code for that at the end of our presentation. We truly value and use your feedback because we are a nonprofit. We are here to serve you. So your feedback is super important to us. The link will be in the chat and we will also share it again at the end of the presentation. Now, let's get into it. The next we have a few questions for the panelists. How do you or the ML teachers in your district balance geographic challenges with the language proficiency needs of the students in your rural district? Jen, would you start this?
I would love to. So, my experience was as an itinerant teacher in a rural part of Beaufort County, which is neighboring Charleston, and we have Hilton Head Island in our district. So, that is a very urban slash suburban area. So, we were on the fringe of a more populated area. So, I was itinerant between three schools. And it takes a lot of careful collaboration with your students, tier one or mainstream teachers. So I would say that making sure to build relationships so that you can collaborate. And I would say also it's really important to give yourself a lot of grace. You are one person, and it's really difficult to be spread so thinly. Emotionally, logistically, academically, there is only so much that one person is able to do. So I would say utilize all of your virtual resources that you have available. Google is a really great way to collaborate from afar with your colleagues, either on documents or presentations, texting, making sure to build those relationships first and foremost will serve you so well.
Sorry. Do any of our other panelists want to add to this discussion?
I'll go ahead and jump in on that. For us, because we are remote rural, there's nothing within our area. We have one small grocery store in Saluda, and that's it. Like to get to any kind of resources, our parents have to travel over 30 minutes. So trying to balance those geographic challenges with our language proficiency needs of students is difficult in that we don't have accessibility to a lot of resources that maybe other areas have. So we have to be very creative within our district to give our students what they need, especially, we have a lot of high need students. We are currently at 43% MLs within our district. So not only do we have a lot of high proficiency needs, but we also have almost a majority of our population are MLs.
Thank you. That really is it's interesting to understand. Do we have any other comments, or would you like to move on to the next question?
I was just going to add that, I did for 10 years, multiple schools. And just when you think you have a system down and something that's working, the next year it changes or you get new students moving in. So my advice is to not be afraid to change things up, even if it's mid-year. If it's not working, it's not working, and it's okay to change your schedule and change how you do things. Sometimes, like one year, I found my high school students needed more attention. So I just had to take a whole day, and every Monday I was going to the high school. And that was the best solution for me. And it's okay. You have to work within those schools. And each year looks different, and what you did, last year might not work for the next year, or it might work 2 years down the road. So, just being flexible and trying a lot of different things, and like Jen say, just building those relationships, especially with your admin, and communicating this with them and keeping them in the loop is also very helpful.
That's such a good point, Destiny. I will just close by saying it's really helpful if you make your schedule around the most important days at your individual schools. For example, if PLC day at one school is on a Tuesday, trying to be there on that day so that you're in the room when conversations about your students are taking place. Making sure that you are at staff meetings whenever available. So making your schedule, building them around the master calendar at your school, because you're going to have the largest impact, not necessarily time-wise on your students, but through advocacy and being at the table when decisions about them are being made, and planning is being done.
Thank you so much for that valuable advice. Let's look at the next question. How do rural factors like limited access to services, transportation, and staffing shape the needs of your ML students? Destiny, I think you would like to start with this one.
I'm going to speak to looking at access to services, and a lot of the rural areas maybe do not provide services that some of the larger areas have. I know my school districts do have like resource centers or different community organizations that will help out. And sometimes my family's wanting to learn English. Okay, here's a great place for you to get free English classes. But then it runs into that transportation issue where my students aren't able to get there. And it's the same thing when you try to do parent teacher conferences or after school meetings or family nights. A lot of times you run into that transportation issue. We were able to, at one of my schools, run an after school program with funding. But we all know, we'll talk more about funding later, is difficult sometimes to use it that way, or to have enough funding to be able to run those programs and provide transportation. So I've seen that with my families a lot of times, that they are not able to access the resources.
Thank you for that information. And would anyone else like to share their thoughts on the rural factors that shape the needs of our ML students?
For me, it has to do with we are so rural. We do not have welcome centers. We don't have resource centers. There's absolutely nothing. So one of the things that our district has done is through our adult education program, they offer the English classes for our parents. So we have some there. Um, there's a parent advocacy group that started with our kindergarten multilingual learners at our elementary school. And for us, staffing is a huge issue. We struggle to get certified staff. We struggle to hang on to staff that want to stay in Saluda because, again, there's nothing there. If people don't have family there, there's no entertainment, there's no movie theater, no bowling, no anything. So it's really hard to attract young teachers that are just out of college that might have their certification. So we have gotten kind of creative with that, and we've taken our TAs and started them in the process of earning degrees. I have currently 4 teachers that are working on their certifications.
It's
And
interesting how creative you have to get to fill those spots. Would anyone else like to join in this conversation?
I'll just piggyback off of Christy. I think that our rural MLs, because of the transient nature of our families, are sometimes unfamiliar with the resources that they could be connected with in their town. And access to those resources is more spread out or sparse. So just advocating for our children to their families in terms of sharing where health centers are, finding networks that they can become a part of to kind of put down roots in their new environment. So we kind of serve as a social worker too, due to staffing and being spread really thin. We're oftentimes the one and only person who is viewing our MLs through the lens of what they need and understanding truly their background and kind of what they're carrying with them as they enter our school building. So the advocacy piece is also a part of our responsibility. And I think the connecting our families with resources becomes something that we do.
Would any of our other panelists like to add to this conversation before we move on to the next question?
And was this not where we had talked about where you mentioned connecting families together?
I think that might be later, but yes,
Okay.
I think that might come at a later time.
Okay.
Okay, let's go on to the third question. What are some challenges and solutions to the lack of funds in rural school districts? Christy, you thought you would start with this one.
Yes, because we are a very small district with a large percentage, we struggle with funding. What we get through Title III funds is not even enough to fund one teacher. So we have to be very careful about curriculums that we're choosing. We have to be very careful about conferences that we send teachers to. We have to be very selective about how we're spending our money. And so for us, because we don't have the funds to hire extra teachers to come in and work with our students, one of the things that we started doing this year was pushing out MLPD to all of our general education teachers in the thought that every teacher is an ML teacher.
I think I really appreciated your perspective, Christy, on shoring up tier one instruction and building the capacity of our classroom teachers. It is definitely not a prerequisite in most elementary education programs or any education program to take coursework in multilingual learners or addressing the needs of multilingual students. So the best way that we can impact our students is ensuring that the education in their mainstream classroom is accessible to them. So I completely agree that development of our staff is a really impactful way to serve our kids in the absence of having many of our multilingual teachers in a building.
And to bounce off of that a little bit further, those students, in our district, our ML students spend most of their time in their core content classes. They're in math, English, science, social studies. And they get maybe one pull-out time for their ML services. So really, they spend the majority of their time with those general education teachers. So if our general education teachers fully understand language objectives, if they fully understand sentence frames and visuals and the importance of pre-teaching vocabulary and linking images with vocabulary or total physical response to the instruction for vocabulary, then we're going to see more growth with our ML students.
Thank you very much for that complete answer. Our fourth question, how do you approach teachers and staff in a professional manner to help them understand the rights and needs of their ML students? Jen, I think you were going to start on this one.
So, one of my many roles that I have held is as an ML teacher specialist for a large district back in Maryland, where I used to teach. And we gave a lot of professional development. And our most impactful route, we've tried a lot of things in giving PD to whole schools or the entire district or to administrators. And the best route I have found is always with starting from a place of empathy and compassion and putting oneself in the position just for even a moment of our ML students and what that might feel like to be a part of a classroom where you may not yet have the language to access what is happening, but you're being held to the same expectations as every other student in the room. So we've showed clips like Valentina Gonzalez's clips that she shares on social media. She speaks in Serbian and gives directions devoid of any images or gestures, and no one understands. And then she gives the same instructions that everyone is able to follow through modeling and visuals and repetition. So we've kind of set the scene first with those pieces. Moises in math class is another excellent clip to show the experience of a child in a classroom where ML supports are not in place. And then leading into Lau versus Nichols, Castaneda versus Pickard, all of the civil rights laws and statutes that we are legally bound to uphold. And giving teachers that background, saying that it is a non-negotiable, just like an IEP might be. An ILAP is a legally binding document. So being very transparent about those things has always proven to be a successful way to enter that conversation. And then just holding teachers accountable through checking in, positive interactions, offering support, creating those relationships, allow for some of those kind of more intense conversations around, I see that this isn't happening, but it has to be happening. How can I support you in that? So oftentimes as an itinerant or rural teacher, you're the only voice for a student. They may be one student in a classroom full of monolingual English speaking peers, and we kind of have to be their advocate. So doing that in a positive and loving way, but firm, has worked for me.
Thank you, Jen. Destiny, did you want to add to your experiences and approaches to this conversation?
When I first read this question, my first thought was making that initial contact with teachers and serving multiple schools. I remember, and teachers switching in and out, and some years they switched my schools on me, and you're learning a new staff and it's very difficult, but trying to build those relationships with teachers and just putting your face out there and physically going to their rooms and talking to them, I found was very valuable. And even especially with the middle and high school grades, just going into that teacher's room and saying, hey, I see so and so struggling with your class. How can I help you? What is going on? Because I hear one thing from the student, but I want to hear what you have to say. And kind of putting the teacher at peace, that you're not in there like, and I got you, oh, you're not doing something. And really just trying to find out what that teacher may need or what that teacher quite doesn't understand about the laws, because we know the laws. And sometimes I've found if I go in there and saying, well, the law says you need to do this, they kind of shut down on you. And so just making that initial contact and saying, how can I help? And then just having that follow up with the teacher. And oh yeah, I'll talk to the student about that. Hey, have you had a chance to look at the ILAP and see that, maybe this will help? Or if you ever need me to come in and kind of sit in and see what's going on, I can do that. Just offering help has helped build those relationships. And I found that teachers are more willing than to come to me when there's an issue, because you can't be everywhere, and also rely on your support and hopefully do the right thing. And then you can't open up into those, well, the law says we do have to do this. So I kind of need you to do this.
Thank you, Destiny. Christy, did you have another perspective or additional ideas on this question?
I do, because of the role that I have as student services coordinator. I walk the line between district administration and classroom teacher. And so, from the district administrator perspective, I have to be aware of the potential for lawsuits within our district or due process hearings. Um, so, my approach is probably a little more firm. But again, I'm coming from that district level to where I'm saying to the teachers, look, this is not an option. I'm here to help. However, this is what you need to do. And it's non-negotiable. So in my role, I have to take more of a hard line with it. Thankfully, most of my teachers are very receptive to it. I've built relationships with them in the past as an instructional coach and as a fellow teacher. So they've taken very well to me stepping into the administrative role. So we really do get into a lot of it is similar to an IEP. It is a legally binding document. It's non-negotiable. You will do this. If you need help, I'm here, but still it's from the administrative district level, it's more of a hard line.
Thank you so much for that. I really feel like we have the whole perspective on this question. Would anybody else like to add to it, or are we ready to move to the next question? Thank you. Let's go to number 5. Question 5. Thank you. How do you combat feeling as though you operate in a silo when you're the only ML specialist in your district or in several schools? And I think, Destiny, we're going to start with this one.
Now, I've never been the only one in the district. Though when I first started, there was only 12 of us in the district, and we met maybe once a month, but I don't think it was even that often. And when we did meet, it was a meeting. We didn't have time to really get to know each other and talk. So that's my biggest thing, is building those connections and those relationships. If it's with other ML teachers in your district, if you can. I was in a unique role where I was elementary all the way up to high school. So I had no one else. I taught all those grade levels, and I had to reach out to my elementary people or my secondary people and, well, what's working for you? What are you doing in this situation? And trying to find the time to bounce ideas off of each other. I also think, SCMLE Network and Carolina TESOL, I mean, those are great organizations to become a part of and really make those connections. I mean, that's why we're doing this event tonight, because there was a need. And we reached out with the network. When we first started, I was tasked to finding some of the teachers in the rural areas. I contacted the Title III coordinator, was like, who's your ML teacher? And it's like, oh, we only have one. And I emailed that person like, hey, let's connect, join the network. We have this group of teachers who want to connect and talk to each other so that we don't feel alone. And then, of course, there's other advocacy for secondary or for MLs or just different groups that you can kind of belong to so that you don't feel alone.
Thank you so much. I feel like that is the biggest thing in this position, especially for rural teachers. Would anyone else like to join in this conversation from our panel?
I'll jump in just to say, find one person who is a like-minded individual in each of your school buildings. If you're an itinerant teacher, one person that you can connect to every time that you're a part of that particular staff for a day, a half a day, however long you are there. that you feel has your best interests at heart and can support you. Find ways to become a part of each staff if at all possible. Go to the little holiday get together. Find a network within your school buildings if at all possible. But for me, as a new teacher, I came to South Carolina during COVID and I did not have a network. So SCMLE became my network. And I have found such a wealth of true friendships and connections and like-minded individuals who we're all doing this work just in different locations in our state. And so we can cheer each other on, share ideas. It's really important to build some sort of network, both physically and virtually, if possible.
I'll second that with that. Within my district, like I said, we've struggled to have certified or even endorsed ML teachers. So within the district, I am one of the only ESOL certified staff members. And even my director of student services, her knowledge for MLs is very limited. So for me, building those relationships with SCML Educator Network, when I took on my role last year, that's when I joined SCML Educator Network because I was like, okay, I need other people to bounce ideas off of. I think Jen, you and I have talked on the phone, to bounce ideas and to run things by each other. So find those people, even if they're in different districts, that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can make connections with. Um, if you're able to go to a conference, I would highly recommend the South Carolina conference or TESOL because you're going to find a whole lot of other people there that are in similar situations that can support you.
Thank you all for that. I have to agree that the South Carolina conference was where I found TESOL and have been so thrilled to be a part of this organization. Let's move to question 6. What barriers do ML families face in a rural area, and how do you work to overcome them? And Destiny, I think you were going to start with this one.
This was like the big question for me. This was like the question that I feel like is just so much to it and so much really to unpack because there are just so many barriers that our students could possibly face. The fact of limited income and social support and even access to internet. A lot of my students didn't have that for a long time. And just transportation, like we talked about, healthcare, and really just making those connections within the community and even that communication with the school and with staff and it's a lot in this question. And I feel like as an ML teacher, we wear many hats. I remember one year I just felt like a school counselor. I mean, there were times I would have to cancel class because these children need something from me that teaching them English right now, they're not going to learn. And I always think of the hierarchy of needs. And if you do not meet those basic needs, and I feel like we a lot of times are that go-between with the families and the school, and we find out beforehand before the school does like what some of these families might need. And so we wear a lot of different hats, and I think it's important when you travel around from school to school is again going back to those connections and finding someone in the school that can also help you. If it's a school counselor or a secretary, another teacher is like, okay, I have a student who needs this, go see this teacher. Or I have a student who needs this, go see this counselor. You need a jacket? Okay, go see this person or a backpack. And just trying to gather all those resources, it's a lot and it's difficult, but I think having that information for each of your schools and your areas is really important. And as those needs come up, that you can help those students.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, are other of our panelists, are you ready to talk about how you've overcome some of these problems?
Christy, did you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Go ahead. I'll
Okay.
chime in at the end.
Awesome. So one thing that came to mind for me is that we oftentimes, I'll completely agree with Destiny in that we wear so many hats. I think it's very important that if your school doesn't have a social worker, we kind of function as a social worker first and foremost because our students are coming with sometimes very profound needs. Their families are experiencing profound need. And we are aware of those things because our families connect with us in a way that they may not connect to any other staff member in the school building. So it's really important that we give all that we can of ourselves, but that we also put in place a few guardrails, things that we know we aren't going to do. We're not going to give legal advice. We're not going to give healthcare advice. Things like that kind of protect yourself so that you can continue doing this work without burnout or doing too much and putting yourself in a tough spot and your family's in a tough spot. So kind of knowing where your barriers are, where your lane is, and reaching out to other staff, other community members whenever possible to make those connections for your families. Something that came to mind is our families often connect with each other in a way that helps them navigate their new situation if they are itinerant or migrant in any way. So oftentimes in the community, families will know each other and support each other in these really organic ways anyway. And if they may not have those family connections yet through siblings or family members or friends, connecting families with one another through school events or just organically after school when they come for pickup is a really helpful thing because families supporting each other is really special and often way more powerful than formal things that we have in place. Oftentimes families gather at churches or at restaurants owned by families in our community. So those are really great connections to make as well.
I'll jump in there. We have a local church that goes above and beyond for our families. So that's one of the ways for us that we've found to overcome some of those challenges living in a rural area. Also, one of the things that we've found here is that families that come here tend to come because they already have family here. So many of our families are interrelated and connected. So that makes a difference as well in helping them overcome some of those boundaries. We also work with Project Good Hope in our elementary school to provide some additional like ABA services to families that need it. And then we also have counselors that come directly to the school.
Thank you so much for that. Let's look at our last question. What do you wish more educators understood about teaching MLs in a rural school? Jen, you were going to start with this question.
I think the advocacy piece really comes up first and foremost for me with this question. I think the linguistic piece of what we do is obviously so important. If our students don't have language access, then they can't fully access their free and appropriate public education that they have a right to have, just like our English speaking students. So linguistic access is really important, but also upholding our students' culture and the assets that they bring with them is not something that just happens. It often takes a lot of advocacy in a building in order to maintain or build a culture where our ML students are really celebrated for the extremely important linguistic and cultural assets that they're bringing to their school buildings. So in terms of working in an ML school, I've worked in urban and suburban settings as well. But oftentimes, because we are spread so thinly, and in more remote areas, there tend to be less staff members with certification or experience in teaching MLs. It's really important that we are that voice for our kids in terms of building capacity, advocacy, being at the table when decisions are made, attending IEP meetings. We're kind of a jack of all trades and a social worker as well. And then the linguistic piece is kind of side by side with that. So it's really an all-encompassing role, whereas urban schools may have more resources or staffing or awareness in place just because of the nature of where they are and the resources that they have. Because we are in this rural setting, we have to take on all of those pieces. And it's really important that we kind of don't lose sight of that social and emotional aspect of our position and role.
And one thing, and we also have all that paperwork to do with all this. So there's that. But one thing I really like what you said was about protecting their culture. And I know Christy had mentioned this the other day, where in her district, they promote people from within. So they've always lived in that rural community. That's what they've always known. And so bringing in these different cultures, it's so important to protect that. So I'm happy you brought that up. That was a very good point.
I think to expand on that, for me, one of the things that I wish more educators understood was that multilingual students are general education students first and foremost. So, yes, they have varying needs. All students have varying needs. We are there to meet the needs of all students, regardless of where they come from, what language they speak. It is imperative that we put student needs first, and that's across all classrooms.
And I'd be curious, for our participants to add in the chat, like, what do you, feel that educators need to know or wish they understood? I'd love to see your answers to this question as well.
Thank you so much. I also teach in a school that is part of a suburban and urban district, but in my school, my school is rural. So I think that all the things that you have said really resonate with me as well. If this discussion has been helpful for you and possibly generated more questions or given you much food for thought, please reach out in the chat box or join us on our social media to get connected to other multilingual learner educators in South Carolina. We know that we have some questions in the chat box. I'm going to move to, we're going to shift our focus a little bit right now and talk about a couple of success stories, and then we will open up for questions and more stories. This was sent to one of our members who cannot be with us tonight, so I thought I would share this with you. Our school had previously had ML services through an online contract service. And I think this was very typical in a lot of districts because they were spread so thin. The students were grouped by grade level and went to this service daily for a pull-out session. One student I had in second grade struggled with anxiety. He cried when he had to take the access test or any other assessment, even in his classes. He did not speak much in any language or to anyone. Due to monthly ML moments during PLCs, newsletters, and a combination of pullouts and push-in services that this member of ours has shared, he overcame his anxiety and was able to improve his English. He's now in 6th grade and he's exited ML program this last year in 2025. Our monthly ML moments and newsletters have helped educate teachers and staff about ML services, iLabs, and strategies, and in turn, the students have benefited. Christy, I know you said you had a story to share as well. Would you
Yes.
like to share that, and then we will open it up for others?
I will. The last time I was in a classroom, my caseload was multilingual learners with a learning disability. So it was an MLWD caseload. And we ran a summer program, and I met this little boy in our summer program. Prior to the program, he had been self-contained for special education. I got to working with him in his reading and stuff over the summer. I went to our district administration at that point and said, nope, pull him out of self-contained, put him with me for resource. We'll put him in general education for his core content. We'll give him oral administration. I want to see what we can do with him. 3 years later, he exited and met proficiency on access. He is currently in high school and thriving. So when we look at that, this is a student with an IEP. He'd been self-contained. He was a multilingual learner. He had so much stacked against him, but he was still able to overcome. And I think if we can get all teachers on board, we could get all students to overcome.
Thank you for sharing that. It brings tears to my eyes. We have set aside some time for you to share stories or ask questions. I'm going to go to the chat box and start with a couple of questions that are there. And then after we've done that, you can unmute and join the conversation. So the first question I have is, my question is concerning language access. What strategies are used to ensure meaningful communication with students and their parents who speak languages other than English to strengthen family engagement in a rural area? And then also on that, how do you handle IEP meetings with parents of multilingual students? Christy, would you like to start with that one?
Sure. A couple different things to unpack there. One of the strategies we've used this year with some of our funding was to purchase bilingual books and to give our students and families bilingual books. So at every family night, the director and I are there doing either an ice cream bar or a hot cocoa bar. And as we're serving hot chocolate or ice cream, we're also handing out bags filled with bilingual books for our families. So that is one way. And the other way is our district paid for one of our ML teachers to get their interpreter certification so that they could interpret at IEP meetings. Now, we are blessed in one way. I mean, we're at 43% of our population are MLs. However, they're all Spanish speaking or a dialect such as mum. So for us, that made the most sense monetarily, is to get somebody certified as an interpreter because we have one language that we're dealing with. However, I need to caution that we translate things that go home, but we have discovered that many of our families can't read in their heritage language. So we can send it home in Spanish, we could send it home in Swahili. It wouldn't matter. They can't read it. So we're also trying to follow up with the voice calls, the automatic voice calls for important information.
And I'll chime in, Christy. That's such a good point. Power School has Bright Arrow that does text to speech. So it may not be perfect. It relies on Google, I think, as a processor. You just have to be careful about the way that you word messages home. But when you make a school-wide call to parents, you can also indicate that you want it translated in the student's contact home language, and it will do text to speech for families if you do a voice call. So you just have to kind of be aware of what resources you have available. I will say that I was coming from Beaufort County, which has a variety of different languages, and we are legally required. Every district has to provide access by law for parents to understand and receive the verbiage that their child that is written in their child's IEP. So having a standard translator who may function for school calls home from the nurse or other reasons may not be sufficient. So Christy had a certified interpreter for educational purposes, and it's so important that we advocate that our school must use a certified interpreter for educational settings in those IEP meetings because it is a legally binding requirement. And a district is required to pay for language line or another similar service if a physical interpreter is not available. So funding is an issue, but the district must pay for it if we have no other way to provide that kind of communication.
Okay, if we don't have, now is a time that we have set aside for you to share stories, questions, ask questions. Please unmute and join the conversation or add it to the chat box. And while we're talking about communication with parents, our district, we have both urban, suburban, we have all three, urban, suburban, and rural. But two students who have moved on and are no longer served as MLs have moved to the high school, and our district ML Services World Languages Coordinator has now trained our first student ambassadors, and they have been trained as interpreters to come and do things during family nights, which has been so cool. So the first four were trained this summer. So they are certified as translators.
I see 3 more questions in the chat box, Betsy.
I can answer that one. I saw the one about middle and high school schedules. Is that correct? Yeah, if there's teachers split their time. I have split my time between middle and high school. I was fortunate enough that my schools were right there next to each other. So it was crazy. They had me, so high school was on a block schedule, and the middle school was on like 7 periods a day, so 4 versus 7. And if they were newcomers, they came down for like fourth block, but that overlapped 2 of my class periods with my middle schoolers. So I did have mixed groups sometimes. Um, I also, yeah, it's hard working out those schedules. I have to get creative. At the middle school level, they were blocked 2 times for ELA. So they had at least 2 class periods back to back for ELA. So I would have my students, I co-taught also, but if I didn't co-teach, I could have them that second part of the ELA block. I worked with that teacher, so she would do most of her instruction during the first part, and that second block, I would see my middle schoolers. So that would give me like the morning to go to the high school and have my classes there, and the afternoon at the middle school. I'd also, because of all the consultative students at the high school, and sometimes those high schoolers, I feel like they fall through the cracks and they get forgotten about at that level because they're long-term MLs and they're consultative all these years. And so I really work hard. I'm just strictly at a 9th grade campus now, but I really work hard at building those relationships with students and making sure they know who I am. I would meet with them and talk with them, and I would call them in. So I would spend a whole day there, like every Monday. at the high school, and so that's why I didn't have scheduled classes at my middle school, or I would schedule classes for my students would be in PE the whole entire year. So when I was at the school, they were with me, but if I couldn't be at the school because of all our meetings and access testing, whatever was going on, they were in PE. So they were in PE the full year. They had somewhere to go. So like I said, just getting creative with your schedule. But I would spend all day Monday at the high school, and then I would check in with those students, call them down, say, hey, what's going on with this class? I see your grades here, and just making sure I'm following up and say, do you need to talk to that teacher? Okay, I give you a week to get this taken care of, or next week we're going to take care of it. And that really helped a lot of my high schoolers, just making sure that they knew someone was there for them and supporting them, and that they weren't doing this alone. And I found just that simple check-in fixed probably about 80% of the problems. And a lot of times I had to follow up with the student or with the teacher and help them talk to them, because still at that age, they don't know how to advocate for themselves. So teaching them self-advocacy and things like that. But you just really have to get creative with your schedule a lot of times, especially when and I went from elementary and middle school too, and that's a crazy schedule as well, because that's completely different. So it's, yeah, being very creative with your time. And I hated not going to a school. The person that took over for me only went like twice a week, and I don't think that's fair for newcomers to only have services twice a week. So yeah, I traveled every day, and I made an effort to get to my schools pretty much every day if I could.
Thank you so much for all the questions. Are there more in the chat that I've missed?
So Betsy, I see that as they've been asking questions, I know Jennifer has answered a few and Christy has answered a few. So if we did not answer your question, you feel free to unmute.
Amanda, I just wanted to say I love your comment about praising teachers for what they're doing well and finding what they already have in place. I completely agree that the goal is never to add extra stuff to a teacher's plate, but to make them see how what they're doing with a very small tweak or twist could really benefit our MLs. That is really, I completely agree with you that that has been the best strategy by far, and helping them to see that any changes that they are making benefit every student in their classroom. So they'll be more on board to maybe make those tweaks and changes. But the low prep or no prep strategies are always my go-to. I completely agree with you. That's a really good point.
One success I had was mostly with it just kind of happened organically, right? Because my classroom is directly in front of the fourth grade classroom. So if there was like downtime or they had planning, they would pull me in. And my background is not elementary education. However, I'm in two elementary schools. Um, what students have to do for like the TDWs looks very similar for what they have to do for the access testing. And so being able to show like how our goals are not necessarily so different where it needs to be something else, but hey, you're already practicing these writing strategies. Why don't we work on this unit together? Like, what's the next unit? And when they share those things with me, then it just kind of helps, because whatever plans we put in place, even though they're made, with the end goal to help the ML students, they help more than just the ML students. And it helps me also be seen as not just like that teacher for the ML kids, but a teacher, because I'm able to step into the classroom, especially if they're inviting me like, hey, would you come model that? Like, what does that look like? And so that's been really helpful.
That's so awesome.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so much.
sharing. We have about 10 minutes left, so let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, which is upcoming events later in December and January. In December, we are putting together, and this will be a recording we're putting together preparing students for access, tips and tricks from ML teachers. And if you have a tip or a trip, a tip, trick, please submit a 60 to 90-second video tip or a resource before December 15th to info@scmle.org. Then in January, we are putting together final details for a virtual event on student storytelling. So check back on our website or social media for forthcoming details. I know we're really excited about that. Then, if you are new to SCMLE, we would love to stay connected with you. We are a nonprofit that supports educators that work with multilingual learners, whether that is an ML teacher or an ML specialist, a content area teacher, other staff around the building, or an administrator, even people in the community. We are here to serve you. We have a private Facebook group for just South Carolina teachers, but everyone is welcome on the public page as well as our other social media platforms. We do recommend you joining our mailing list. It's a great way to stay connected and make sure you don't miss any events. We only send a newsletter once a month and only a reminder whenever there's an event, so we don't spam your email. And anyone is welcome to sign up for that newsletter. Slide 19 is our feedback form. Please, please, please fill that out. And we want to thank once again Christy Dickinson, Destiny Shannon, and Jen Saunders for sharing your expertise and answering all of our questions. We really appreciate it. And if you, and please remember to email info@scmle.org to request a certificate. And also, if someone will put that in the chat box again for all of our participants. And now we have our drawing. I believe Melinda has all the names in the spinner. And go ahead, Melinda, you can take it away.
Do you guys all see the spinner? Yes? Okay. And if I spelled your name incorrectly, I'm sorry. I was jumping between screens. So, but here we go.
Congratulations, Amanda. We will get in touch with you to post and post your email in the chat so we can get in touch with you to get those Saddleback Library out to you. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you for being here. And happy holidays. We hope you have a great, 2.5 weeks left, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Amanda, where are you located?
I'm in Lancaster County, South Carolina.
Is that close to Columbia?
Not exactly.
Okay, that is fine. We are one of our directors was going to be in Columbia next weekend, so I was just trying to coordinate.
I will tell you this. So, one of the state, oh gosh, what is her title? Ingrid, Dr. Corpus, she lives in Waxhaw, and so do I. So if she has it, it would not be like it's super far out of the way for me to go pick it up at the house.
I will be. Is anybody else going to the MLP collaborative next week?
To be very honest, I think it's in Charleston right now at one of our directors' houses. So it may have to be shipped to you, Amanda.
That's fine.
But I'll find out for sure. I'm drafting an email to you right now, and it CC'd our director on it. So we can kind of figure out the best way to get your prize to you.
And we definitely will do that. And Christy said not Christy, I'm sorry. The lady, the director who has it
Kristen.
said she's going to be in Columbia next week. That's why I mentioned that.
Awesome. That
Yeah.
makes
That's
sense.
why, well,
Okay.
that's why I asked about the MLP collaborative, because the MLP collaborative at the State Department of Ed is next week. And
Yeah.
Kristen usually comes up for that. So I usually see Kristen at that. So, but Ingrid is usually at that as well. So even if
She's
we could
like,
make
you know,
like
she's
a,
like the state person, but she used to be in Lancaster. And that's how I met her. Or Erin too, because Erin is our head honcho at the county level. But if she has it, she'll make sure it gets to me or for us to share.
That's what she was asking, if your person was going to be at that meeting, because she could just hand it off to her. So
I
that,
don't know, but let me ask. I'll ask Erin if she's
Yeah.
going to be there.
okay.
yes.
Okay.
It's next Thursday, I think. The 11th, I
Thursday the
believe.
11th. I'll ask
I think
Erin.
so. Let me just double check that. Yeah, it's Thursday the 11th. Ask her if she'll be at the MLP collaborative.
Okay.
Because then if that's the case, Kristen could bring it up there and give it to her